When Drew Johnson, a successful marketing director and Chicago native, came home one late evening, all he expected was a quiet night in his own apartment. But little did he know, a routine return to his upscale apartment building would become a full-blown viral sensation. Standing between him and his own front door was a woman many might call a Karen, the type who patrols neighborhoods as if they were her own, clutching her assumptions tighter than a lifeline. Drew had only just parked his car and was heading up to his building's entrance when he noticed a figure watching him intently from the lobby. He tried to ignore it, thinking nothing of it. But as soon as he placed his key into the lock, she pounced, stepping into his path, blocking the entrance and staring him down like he was a suspect in his own life. And it only got worse from there. What started as an inconvenience quickly spiraled into a terrifying and rage-inducing ordeal as this woman accused him, pepper-sprayed him, and even called the police, attempting to destroy his life, all while her ignorance and privilege were caught on camera for the world to see. But Drew wasn't who she thought, and he was about to show her and the police the power of the truth. The shocking turn of events that followed left everyone, including the police, utterly stunned. Drew took a deep breath, trying to process what was happening. This woman with a perfectly coiffed blonde bob, designer clothes, and an attitude sharper than her manicure, was standing in his way as if she owned the building. "Excuse me, can I help you?" Drew asked, keeping his tone calm. Her eyes narrowed as she folded her arms. "Actually, I should be asking you that. I haven't seen you around here before, and you look suspicious. You don't live here, do you?" Her words dripped with an icy judgment that was all too familiar to Drew. "Yes, I do. I've lived here for almost a year now," he replied, attempting to step around her. But she sidestepped, mirroring his movements with alarming speed. "Oh, I don't think so," she snapped. "You look like you might be here to deal or something. I know your type." Drew's patience was wearing thin, but he knew better than to let his temper flare. Years of navigating similar interactions had taught him the value of keeping his cool. He pulled out his key card, clearly showing it to her. "This is my key," he said. "Now please move." But she remained unmoved, her lips tightening into a stubborn line. "If you're really a resident, you wouldn't mind waiting here while I call security. If you've got nothing to hide, then you'll have no problem with that, right?" The absurdity of the situation gnawed at him. Here he was, in front of his own apartment building, being forced to prove his innocence to a stranger who had decided he didn't belong. Frustration mounting, he looked around, noticing that a few other residents were glancing at them but quickly turned away, not wanting to get involved. Seeing her finger hover over her phone, Drew realized she was serious about calling the police. Trying to maintain control of the situation, he took out his driver's license and held it out for her to see. "Look, here's my ID. It has my address. Can I go in now?" She glanced at his ID briefly, barely acknowledging it. "For all I know, that's fake," she scoffed, backing up slightly as if he was about to lunge. "I've read about people like you sneaking in. This neighborhood is going downhill, and it's because people like me don't do their part to keep an eye on things." A surge of anger shot through him. "People like you?" he echoed, his voice rising. "Yes, people like me," she sneered, "who care about safety and security. I'm calling the cops. If you really belong here, I'm sure they'll confirm it." Drew felt his stomach drop. He knew that in situations like this, the outcome could swing wildly depending on the arriving officers. He reached for his phone and started recording, documenting the incident in case things turned against him. "Oh, now you're recording me?" she said with mock amusement, unbothered. "Go ahead, get it on camera. You think I'm scared? The police are going to be on my side. You're the one trespassing." But Drew's patience was exhausted. "I've done nothing wrong. I'm just trying to get into my own home. You're harassing me." She responded by pepper-spraying him without warning. Drew recoiled, stumbling backward as the burning liquid struck his face. Tears blurred his vision as he struggled to keep his phone steady, catching her self-satisfied smirk on camera as she stepped back, waiting for the police to arrive. Within minutes, red and blue lights flooded the entrance. 2 officers stepped out of the patrol car, assessing the situation as Drew wiped his face, still reeling from the pepper spray. She wasted no time in rushing over to the officers, her voice loud enough to make Drew's head throb. "Thank God you're here. This man tried to break into our building. I caught him before he could get in." Drew, still recording, turned his phone toward the officers. "Officer, I live here. My key, Idaho, and even my car in the parking lot can prove it. I just want to go to my apartment. She assaulted me and accused me of things with no evidence." One of the officers, clearly conflicted, looked between Drew and the woman. "Sir, can we see your ID?" Drew nodded, handing it over, keeping his gaze steady. The officer glanced at his license, then back at him. "We'll verify this, but please wait here for now." The woman interjected, her voice laced with entitlement. "Why are you even bothering to check? Just look at him. I'm telling you he doesn't belong here." But as the officers verified Drew's information, their demeanor changed. "Ma'am, his address matches this building." She stammered, the color draining from her face. That can't be right. He must be lying." "He's not lying, ma'am," the officer said, his tone firm. "And we're going to need to ask you to step aside." The tables had turned, and for the first time, the woman's self-assurance faltered. Drew captured every second of her unraveling, her disbelief now blending with dawning fear. He had the evidence, and the officers seemed to be siding with him. As Drew stood there, eyes still stinging, the officer pulled him aside. "Mr. Johnson, would you like to press charges for the assault?" The question sent a wave of relief through him. "Yes, officer, I would." Her face twisted into shock. "You can't do this. I was just trying to protect the building." The officer wasn't interested in her excuses. "Ma'am, your actions have consequences, and this man had every right to enter his own home." In a final act of justice, Drew watched as they led her to the squad car, her protests now falling on deaf ears. The officer returned his belongings, offering a look of genuine remorse. "Sorry you had to go through that, sir. We've seen an increase in incidents like these. You're not the first, and unfortunately you probably won't be the last." Drew posted the footage that night, his face still red from the pepper spray, telling his story with unflinching honesty. Within days, it went viral. News outlets picked up the story, calling out not only the woman's actions, but a broader conversation on race and implicit bias. Her actions had been exposed to millions, and her reputation was in tatters. The apartment building management reached out, apologizing and offering to cover any legal fees he chose to pursue. His community rallied behind him, sending messages of support from all corners of the country. For Drew, the experience served as a bitter reminder of the challenges he faced even in his own neighborhood. But he'd found strength in his own truth, standing firm against assumptions and prejudice. And the world had stood with him, seeing the harsh reality that he'd faced, and perhaps making one small step toward a greater understanding.